pace știm noi din vremuri strămoșești, cuvânt de dor și luptă, de doine și povești. Dar dacă astăzi pacea e lege și scut, e pentru că pe lume partidul s-a născut. Țări pe drum știut, e pentru că pe lume partidul s-a născut. E pentru că pe lume partidul s-a dulci cuvinte le-am moștenit în grai, doar bănuiam ce înseamnă, ce tâlcuri au sub strai. Dar dacă astăzi tâlcul de plin l-am priceput, e pentru că pe lume partidul s-a născut. самых окраин, южный город от северных морей. Человек проходит, как хозяин необъятной родины своей. Тут жизнь невольна и широка, точно Волга полная течет. Молодым везде у нас дорога, старикам везде у нас почет. заслугам каждый награжден. Золотыми буквами мы пишем всенародный сталинский закон. Этих слов величие и славу никакие годы не сотрут. Человек всегда имеет право на учение, подвиг и на труд. Весенний ветер веет, с каждым днем все радостнее жить. И никто на свете не умеет лучше нас смеяться и любить. Но сурово брови мы насупим, если враг захочет нас сломать. Как небесную родину мы любим, бережем, как ласковую мать.
и без оплат. И нас не согреет треск речей под барабанный раскат. Марш левый, два, три, марш левый, два, три, встать ряды, товарищ нам. Ты войдешь в наш единый рабочий фронт, потому что рабочий ты сам. И так как все мы люди, то должны мы, извините, что-то есть. Хотят накормить нас пустой болтовней, шепчат спасибо за честь. Марш левый, два, три, марш левый, два, три, встать ряды, товарищ нам. Ты войдешь в наш единый рабочий фронт, потому что рабочий ты сам. И так как ты рабочий, то не жди, что нам поможет другой. Себе мы свободу добудем вдвоем своей рабочей рукой. Марш левый, два, три, марш левый, два, три, встать ряды, товарищ нам. Ты войдешь в наш единый рабочий фронт, потому что рабочий ты сам. Modern Platz in der See ist. Bring dich ein in der Arbeit der Einheitsfront, weil du auch ein Arbeiter bist. Ты войдешь в наш единый рабочий фронт, потому что рабочий ты сам. Rein dich ein in der Arbeit der Einheitsfront, weil du auch ein Arbeiter bist.
Pod słońcem rasti jasna dzieci, rasti i cvietaj zemljoradnih ljudi i neka mir nad tvojim ljudima vlada, mir tvojim lađama napuči i tvome danu što se vedar budi. Rasti sretna da svi narodi vide, sa strana svih, sa juga i sjevera, kako se rađa i kako se voli, kako se brani zemlja proletera. Pod zvijezdom slobode, pod rukom partije i pod srcem Tita. Rasti cvjetaj pod zvijezdom slobode, pod rukom partije i pod srcem Tita. Sreći u vodi i u zraku, u pjesmi strojeva i u sjaju žita. Rasti i cvjetaj pod zvijezdom slobode, pod rukom partije i pod srcem Tita. Rasti i cvjetaj pod zvijezdom slobode, pod rukom partije костяк, в жизни важен первый шаг. Слышишь, веют над страною ветры яростных атак. И вновь продолжает собой, и сердцу тревожно в груди. И Ленин такой молодой, и юный октябрь впереди. И Ленин такой молодой, и юный октябрь впереди. Весть летит во все концы, вы поверьте нам, отцы, будут новые победы, станут новые бойцы. Милости не жди, жизнь для правды не щади. Нам, ребята, в этой жизни только с правдой по пути. И он продолжает собой, и сердце тревожно в груди. И Ленин такой молодой, и юный октябрь.
Hello, everybody, and welcome along. This is the evening of the 3rd of May 2026, and here we are with a live stream here tonight where we're going to be talking about the US, troop drawdown allegedly in Germany, what this is in terms of what is real and what is not. So we're going to be talking about that as our primary topic, then obviously taking your questions as well. But be sure, if you have not done so already, to like and share this stream. We are currently live on Twitch and on YouTube and on Rumble and on X and on Substack as well. So if you are on any of those, be sure to subscribe, especially the alternative platforms, which of course we're going to need if and when YouTube puts the bullet into us, metaphorically speaking, of course. So Yes, here we are on a Sunday evening. It is your weekly live stream from us here at Liberation News Network, and we're going to get into the reality of the Trump reorganization, shall we say? So, greetings to everybody in the chat. I'll get to some questions later on. I'm going to start off by looking at the supposed uh, German-American rupture, what it means and what it doesn't mean. Now, in case you missed it, on the 29th of April this year, Trump declared that his administration was, quote, studying and reviewing the possible reduction of troops in Germany. Within 48 hours, the Pentagon confirmed the withdrawal of 5,000 US personnel from the FRG, around about 14% of the total American force stationed there. Even after this drawdown, however, Germany will still retain roughly 30,000 US troops, making it the second largest host of American military power globally, only surpassed by, of course, Japan. The stated cause of this is German Chancellor Friedrich Merz's refusal to openly endorse US military action against Iran. This, of course, triggered Trump's massive insecurities, and he suddenly became convinced that this was going to be the way to pressure the Germans to withdraw a certain amount of troops from Germany. But in reality, all that Trump is really doing is restoring the former status quo, in that that's the number you end up with in Germany after the withdrawal, that is 30,000, is the same as it was in Trump's first term. The reason why it went up so apparently dramatically under Biden was because of Biden's rush to shore up NATO and the very insecure US vassal states in the East at the beginning of the Russian special military operation. So that's why it went up again. In Trump's first term, he did draw them down. So I'm going to be getting into why that is, and going to be looking at the actual story behind the headlines here. So to understand this latest event, we must locate it in the broader crisis of the US-led imperialist bloc, a crisis this we have analysed here on the Liberation News Network extensively in recent months. The US now faces what is termed peer competitor incapacity, the demonstrated inability of the US military mercenary proxy model to achieve strategic objectives against near peer adversaries, such as, of course, Russia, but also Iran now as well. This is all becoming very clear over the last 4 years. Washington's strategic pivot has therefore been towards the remilitarization of Germany and Japan, as we discussed on the most recent Decline and Fall show. These are historically subordinated but industrially strong US allies, and this is a means of compensating for the political and economic impossibility of mass casualty warfare waged by the imperial core nations using its own forces. This here creates a profound contradiction. The US demands that Germany rearm and spend 3% of its GDP on defense and assume greater responsibility for European security. Simultaneously, though, the US uses troop withdrawals as a punitive instrument whenever Berlin asserts even a minimal amount of strategic autonomy. The message here is very schizophrenic. The US wants Germany to become a bigger military power, but only on terms acceptable to US imperialism, never ones that could ever possibly impinge upon the exclusive rights of the US as they would see it. This is a classical position of a hegemonic power confronting the rise of a subordinate but still indispensable ally. The hegemon must both empower and constrain its potential rival, which generates friction that accelerates rather than arrests. systemic transition. Now, the US obviously has maintained a very significant military presence in Germany for many years now. So the current crisis cannot be understood without examining the historical trajectory of American troop deployment in Germany, a trajectory that reveals the evolving function of the German Republic, the Federal Republic of Germany, within the US imperial strategy from the Cold War to the present post-Cold War period and the dawning period of great power confrontation. Now, at the height of the Cold War, the US maintained a whole army in Germany of approximately 250,000 men, a force which reflected the centrality of West Germany to the American strategy that it used against the Soviet Union and the DDR, of course. This massive deployment was not defensive. It was constitutive of the post-war imperialist order in Europe. The US military presence ensured that West German reindustrialization and capitalist reconstruction proceeded under American political and military supervision, preventing any independent German foreign policy orientation and reintegrating the West German economy into the dollar-based Atlanticist system. This was started due to the fears of revolution and the immediate urgent need to rebuild West Germany and incorporate it into the emergent US-led imperialist bloc. The troop numbers during this period, from 1945 to roughly 1990, remained very stable, fluctuating between 200 and 250,000 personnel. This stability reflected the frozen character of the Cold War confrontation in Europe. The Iron Curtain was a fixed boundary, and American military powers deployed to supposedly defend it, rather than engage in forced projection beyond it. So there is a crucial difference to be noted in this. Now, we will move to our next section in just a moment. If you just bear with me for a second, I'm just going to go grab some water. So just to take a brief intermission here, and I'll be right back. So this, of course, deployment of a vast army into Germany lasts until the counter-revolution that destroys the GDR and, of course, the USSR itself in 1989 to 91. So the reunification, in reality, the West German annexation of East Germany precipitates the first major restructuring of American military presence. Not an increase to consolidate gains, but a drastic reduction, reflecting a changed strategic environment. By the early 90s, US troop levels thus had fallen to approximately 100,000, which was a 60% reduction from the Cold War peak of just 15 years earlier. This drawdown was driven by multiple factors: the disappearance of the Soviet Union. There was a degree of congressional pressure to downscale the armed forces and spending on the armed forces, see how well that turned out, and the reorientation of US imperialist military strategy toward power projection in West Asia and Southeast Asia, rather than a static army being deployed in the center of Europe. The 1990s reduction was not, however, a withdrawal from the German base structure. Rather, it represented a transformation in the function of German base forces from a army that was supposedly there to guard the Fulda Gap against Soviet armored thrusts to a power projection platform for operations that took place well beyond Europe. This was also based on a US ruling class that was confident at the time that they were not going to face any working class militancy or had any reason to fear revolution in Western Europe. Therefore, the extensive military forces that they had in Germany, which was there to really secure the capitalist Germany against potential domestic revolt, the bases in Germany, particularly Ramstein Air Base, Spangdahlem Air Base, and the army facilities at Baumholder and Grafenwöhr, were reconfigured as staging areas for US imperialist expeditionary warfare in the former Yugoslavia, West Asia, and Africa. This again changes in the period of what used to be referred to as TWAT, the War Against Terror. So the post 9/11 period introduced further fluctuations in US troop levels in Germany, though these fluctuations reflected operational tempo rather than strategic reorientation. The troop numbers during the Iraqi and Afghanistan occupations fluctuated from approximately 50 to 70,000 personnel. The German bases served as critical logistical hubs for the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Ramstein handled aerial refueling, medical evacuation, and drone operations. Landstuhl Regional Medical Center treated tens of thousands of wounded US soldiers. The Rhine Ordnance Barracks and other facilities managed the flow of equipment and personnel to the West Asian theaters of war. This period also saw the functional transformation of US military presence in Germany from a primarily European security mission to a global power projection infrastructure. The German-based forces were no longer even be presented as being defensive. They were using Germany as a platform to project American military power across the Greater Middle East, North Africa, and Central Asia. Now we get to the Trump first term, where Trump, in his usual crude style, initiated a significant reduction in US forces in Germany as part of a broader transactional approach to alliance management. But it must be emphasized that the forces deployed in Germany have been shrinking for over 30 years now. In 2020, Trump ordered the withdrawal of some 11,900 troops from Germany, reducing the total presence from approximately 34,500 to roughly 24,000. This first Trump drawdown was explicitly punitive, motivated by Trump's grievances over what he perceived to be low German defense spending levels and his broader disdain that he expresses all the time for multilateral alliance structures. But of course, Trump doesn't actually understand the strength of the empire that he's running, and so he keeps inadvertently tripping over it. The Biden administration, which ran up to 2025, halted and partially reversed this withdrawal, restoring troop levels to approximately 35,000 by 2024. The Biden restoration reflected the Democratic Party's commitment to Atlanticism and the perceived need to reassure European allies during the Ukraine crisis. However, the restoration was incomplete. The troop numbers never returned to pre-Trump levels, and the functional character of German-based forces continued to evolve toward power projection and logistical support rather than territorial defense. This reveals, of course, that for all the talk of a Russian threat, one doesn't really exist, and the US imperial planners very much know about that. So, the current difficulties in the US-German relationship, or the current apparent difficulties, we will now discuss these. So, Trump 2, which is a degree more wildly inconsistent than Trump 1, has ordered a further withdrawal of 5,000 troops from Germany, reducing the presence to around about 30,000. This represents a cumulative reduction of approximately 88% from Cold War peaks, from 250,000 to 30,000, and a reduction of roughly 14% from the restored Biden-era levels. The current drawdown must thus be understood in the context of the broader strategic shift we have considered. The crisis of the proxy warfare model revealed by the Ukraine special military operation and the pivot towards remilitarizing Germany and Japan as surrogate military powers. The withdrawal of 5,000 troops is not a strategic disengagement from Europe. It is a disciplinary instrument designed to force German compliance with American war aims against particularly Iran, while simultaneously demanding that Germany itself assume greater military responsibilities, the United States is politically incapable of fulfilling itself, both politically and military. The residual 30,000 troops remain functionally indispensable, though, when it comes to Germany. They operate the Ramstein drone warfare hub, the Landstuhl model medical complex, the Spangdahlem Air Operations Center, and the extensive logistics and communications infrastructure that underwrites American military operations against free continents. These are not symbolic deployments, they are structural components of US military power across the globe that cannot be replicated elsewhere in short or medium term. So here we talk about the evolution from an army of occupation to a platform to from which to stage aggression elsewhere. The quantitative history of US troop levels tells us only part of the story, though, of their role. The qualitative transformation of the American military presence in Germany is very significant, though. In the Cold War era, US forces in Germany were primarily ground combat formations, armored divisions, and infantry divisions, oriented towards territorial defense against what was supposedly going to be a Soviet conventional attack. The 7th Army and its subordinate divisions, the 1st Armored Division and the 3rd Infantry Division, were among these. These were configured for large-scale conventional warfare on German soil. In the post-Cold War era, these ground combat formations were progressively withdrawn or transformed. The contemporary US military presence in Germany is dominated by the Air Force operations, special operations, logistics, medical intelligence, and communications units, forces not configured for territorial defense but for global power projection. The German-based US military is now an expeditionary infrastructure rather than a defensive army. This goes along with transformation of US imperialism's role and thus, of course, its military doctrine. This functional transformation has paradoxical implications for German sovereignty. On the one hand, the reduction in ground combat forces and the shift towards air, space, and cyberspace and logistics functions reduces the visible American military footprint on German territory. On the other hand, the infrastructural dependency sharpens. German territory hosts the communications networks, satellite and ground stations, drone control centers, and medical facilities that enable American military operations worldwide. A German government that genuinely sought to terminate the American military presence would not merely be removing foreign soldiers, it would be dismantling a global military infrastructure that serves American imperial interests across multiple continents and thus also serves German ruling class interests. So we talked about the numbers in Germany in terms of U.S. forces and like what they changes over time have done with those. But here we need to discuss why, even though like Trump and his feeble collection of fans that he still has left keep talking about, well, I'm sick of Europe. I've had enough of it. This Mertz guy, he looks like a penis in a suit. I have had enough. So Trump keeps talking that way. But of course, the US can't just up sticks and leave NATO. Um, this is this is a fantasy that some people have. Like, no matter if Trump withdraws 5,000 troops from Germany, there is a very deep economic relationship between Germany and the United States, which this military garrisoning has as its root. There's a reason why US troops are there, and it's related to, of course, in the beginning of that alliance, the US economically and militarily reconstituted West Germany to stuff it with Nazis and use it against the Soviet Union. but since reunification, the economic balance between the two has further shifted and evolved. So the military political problems here can't be separated from the dense web of commodity and capital flows that bind the two economies. Trade between the United States and Germany is not incidental to the relationship. It constitutes one of the central arteries of the Atlanticist imperialist economy. So Germany and the United States are among each other's most significant trading partners. According to the latest US Census Bureau data for 2025, US goods exports to Germany totaled 47.9 billion in the first 7 months of the year, January to July 2025, while US goods imports from Germany reached 92.4 billion over the same period, yielding a goods trade deficit of 44.5 billion in just 7 months. For the full year 2025, the US goods trade deficit with Germany stood at $73 billion, making Germany the seventh largest source of American trade deficits globally, behind only the EU as a whole, China, Mexico, Vietnam, Taiwan, and, of all places, Ireland. That'll be about export of financial services and more than anything else, I suspect. Over the 12 months through May 2025, the United States exported 78.04 billion in goods to Germany, which is 3.71% of total US exports, while importing $161.63 billion from Germany, which is 4.66% of total US imports. The structural asymmetry is stark. Germany exports more than twice as many goods to the United States as it imports, a pattern that has persisted for decades and reflects the specific character of German monopoly capital. German exports to the United States are dominated by high-value manufactured goods, automobiles and automobile components, such as those produced by Mercedes-Benz, BMW, Volkswagen, and Porsche. Industrial machinery and machine tools, chemicals and pharmaceuticals, BASF, Bayer, Merck, etc. Electrical equipment and precision instruments and aerospace components. These are not generic commodities, they are the product of a highly concentrated, technologically advanced industrial structure that the US cannot replicate domestically in the short or medium term. American manufacturing, hollowed out by decades of financialization and deindustrialization, lacks the skilled labor force from supplier networks and capital goods base to substitute for German industrial capital in these sectors. American exports to Germany are structurally different in composition. Agricultural products such as soybeans, corn, and wheat are prominent. Energy commodities, liquefied natural gas and crude oil, as we've already covered, but also refined petroleum products, particularly since the forced rupture with Russian supplies that the German ruling class agreed to, and aerospace products, Boeing, etc. Pharmaceuticals and medical devices, software and digital services, and financial services. The asymmetry is telling. German exports advanced manufactured capital goods. The United States exports its raw materials, energy, agricultural commodities, and services rooted in dollar-denominated financial circuits. The trade structure reproduces the core periphery dynamic within the imperialist bloc itself. Germany functions as the industrial workshop of the Atlanticist economy, while the German states provide the monetary, financial, energy, and military infrastructure. The German trade surplus with the US is not merely a statistical curiosity. It represents a transfer of industrial value that sustains German capital accumulation while simultaneously deepening German dependency on American financial and security guarantees. So, the longer the relationship has gone on, the more codependent it is. So, like the idea that the Americans can just walk away from this is, quite frankly, completely and utterly ludicrous. So if we look at like the automotive sector, here we can see a study in like a codependent relationship. So the automobile industry here exemplifies the stakes involved for both parties with German-American relations. German automotive manufacturers operate major production facilities in the United States. You have BMW at Spartanburg, South Carolina's plant is the company's that is largest global production site. Mercedes-Benz maintains substantial operations in Alabama and South Carolina. Volkswagen produces cars in Tennessee. These facilities employ tens of thousands of American workers and represent billions of dollars in fixed capital investment. Conversely, American automotive suppliers such as Ford, GM, etc., maintain significant operations in Germany, though these are increasingly subordinate to German corporate structures. A genuine rupture in German-American relations would threaten this integral production architecture. Tariffs, investment restrictions, or supply chain disruptions would inflict immediate damage on both sides, but the damage would be asymmetrically distributed. German capital would lose access to the world's largest consumer market, or certainly one of them. American capital would lose access to precision engineered components and capital goods that domestic industry cannot presently supply. This asymmetry gives Washington leverage in trade negotiations, even as it underscores American structural dependency on German industrial capacity. So we now move to talk about the trade in energy, which of course is very important. It's one of the major motivating factors in the American decision to try and stamp out Russian collaboration with Germany in this sector. So, looking now at the energy trade, the move of the Americans 4 years ago to rapidly insert themselves where Russia had been forced out is, of course, very significant. Germany was once the world's largest importer of Russian natural gas and has been compelled to reorient its strategy when it comes to energy towards liquefied natural gas, which is sourced predominantly from the United States. American LNG exports to Germany have expanded dramatically. The United States is now the world's largest LNG exporter, and Germany is among the fastest growing markets for American liquefied gas. This trade is conducted through long-term purchase agreements that lock German utilities and industrial consumers into dollar-denominated contracts with American suppliers. The infrastructure such as the floating LNG terminals at Wilhelmshaven, Brunsbüttel, and Lubmin, represents billions in fixed capital investment predicated on the continuation of American supply of LNG. The energy trade has transformed Germany that previously had access to Russian gas into a new form of American leverage over German economic policy. Washington can now threaten energy supply disruptions as a means of disciplining German diplomatic autonomy, precisely the dynamic that operates in the background of the current troop withdrawal crisis. German ruling class has traded one form of energy subordination for another without achieving any genuine sovereignty. So here we'll look at capital exports and financial interpenetration, because when you see how interlinked the two economies actually are, you'll see why, even if Trump wanted to de-link from Germany, he would not be able to do so. He would be overruled. So trading commodities, while significant, represents only one dimension of the German-American economic nexus. The flow of capital in the forms of direct investment, portfolio investment, banking operations, and financial services constitutes an even deeper form of structural integration that constrains the strategic autonomy of not just Germany, but also the United States itself. So let's look at foreign direct investment here. The stock of bilateral foreign direct investment between the United States and Germany is among the largest in the world, with precise data now available to us from both American and German governments. German direct investment in the United States, according to the US Bureau of Economic Analysis, stands at it increased in 2024 by $39.7 billion alone, which contributes to a total EU-wide investment in the United States of $204.7 billion. In terms of being ultimate beneficial owner, Germany ranks as the third largest investor in the United States by the end of 2023, with an accumulated foreign direct investment stock of $657.8 billion, surpassing the Brits with $635.6 billion, and trailing only the Japanese with 783.3 and Canada, so 749.6. The latest data from the German Bundesbank released in 2025 indicates that Germany has been involved in primary and secondary direct investment in the US, which in total stood at 436 billion euros, which is roughly 470 to 480 billion dollars. This positions the US as the single largest destination for German capital export globally. In terms of flows rather than stock, Germany was among the top 5 investors in the US during the first months of 2025, alongside Japan, the Netherlands, Britain, and Ireland. German capital continues to flow into American manufacturing, particularly chemicals, with 31 billion FDI from Germany flowing into that sector in the first months of 2025. Wholesale trade and information technology here are also very important. American direct investment in Germany, conversely, the US direct investment abroad position in Europe increased by $88.4 billion in 2024, with Germany identified by the Bureau of Economic Affairs as one of the primary destinations alongside Luxembourg. The total US direct investment stock in Germany is approximately $140 to $150 billion, concentrated in software and digital platforms, financial services, aerospace, and defense supply chains, as well as pharmaceuticals and automotive operations. The way FDI stock, therefore, tools approximately $800 billion to $1 trillion in accumulated investment positions, making the German-American investment relationship one of the densest bilateral capital interpenetrations in the history of global empire. So we've seen here the very comprehensive integration that you get between American and German imperialism. This is typical of like the way in which there is so much interpenetration between all the different aspects and countries of the imperialist bloc. So you also have a great deal of financial integration between Germany and the United States in the banking sector. So German banking in the United States is quite extensive. Deutsche Bank, despite its well-documented history of money laundering, sanctions evasion, and regulatory violations, in fact, probably because of those, maintains substantial operations in the United States as one of the largest foreign banks operating there. Commerzbank, DZ Bank, and other German financial institutions have operated significant American banking operations. These banks serve German corporate clients operating in the US, underwriting dollar-denominated bond issues and participating in US Treasury auctions. Their American operations are profitable, but also expose them to American regulatory and sanctions jurisdiction, a source of leverage which the US imperialists have repeatedly exploited. American banking in Germany is also extensive, with American financial institutions dominating investment banking, asset management, and derivatives trading in Germany. Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, and Citigroup are deeply embedded in German corporate finance, M&A advisory, and sovereign debt management. BlackRock and Vanguard are among the largest shareholders in virtually every major German publicly traded corporation, exercising influence over corporate governance and strategic decision-making through passive index fund holding. The financial penetration evident here means that German corporate policy is in significant measure responsive to the interests of American financial capital. The euro-dollar nexus is the other important part here. The German banking system and the European Central Bank operate within a global monetary order dominated by the US dollar. German banks hold substantial dollar-denominated assets and liabilities. German corporations borrow in dollars. German sovereign and quasi-sovereign entities, such as the Länder governments, issue dollar bonds. The dollar's role in the global reserve currency, the denominator of commodity prices and the settlement currency for international trade, still to this day, means that German capital cannot escape American monetary jurisdiction without catastrophic disruption. The financial dependency was starkly illustrated during the 2022 sanctions campaign against Russia, when German banks and corporations were compelled to sever long-standing commercial relationships under US pressure and often took substantial hits to their own balance sheets in doing so. The extraterritorial application of American financial sanctions through the SWIFT system, dollar clearing, and secondary sanctions demonstrates that German monetary sovereignty is in practice subordinate to American policy. So move now to ownership of German capital. So beyond direct investment, the portfolio investment relationship is equally significant. American institutional investors such as pension funds, mutual funds, hedge funds, and private equity firms hold substantial positions in German equities, corporate bonds, and sovereign debt. This portfolio capital, is highly mobile and sensitive, in fact, incredibly sensitive to political risk. A deterioration in German-American relations would trigger mass capital flight, bond spread widening, and equity market decline, punishing German asset values and raising the cost of capital for German corporations. Conversely, German institutional investors, such as insurance companies, pension funds, and the Bundesbank's foreign exchange reserves, hold substantial positions in US Treasury securities, America, as well as American corporate debt and American equities. German capital is, in effect, a creditor to the American state and to American monopoly capital. The creditor position does not translate into political leverage. Rather, it creates a structural interest in the German ruling class for continuing American financial stability, and this in turn disciplines German policy. German capital cannot afford an American financial crisis or a dollar collapse because this would have catastrophic effects on their own portfolio. The result is an equilibrium of mutual vulnerability that operates as a powerful constraint on any potential political rupture. Both the German and American ruling classes are locked into a relationship of financial codependency that transcends the policy preferences that any individual president or chancellor might have. So here we have a situation where neither the US nor Germany, can walk away from this relationship, not without creating a crisis for themselves due to the extreme level of integration between the German manufacturing, German banking and finance, and American banking and finance. So the military, trade, and financial dimensions here must be understood as interlocking components of a single imperialist structure that neither Germany nor the United States can actually dismantle. Even if Trump wanted to do it, he would not be able to. So here, first of all, we'll look at the German dependencies. The German Federal Republic is integrated into the US-led order, and it is constitutive of German capitalism's post-war reconstruction and present function within the US imperialist bloc. You have, of course, one of the first aspects of this, nuclear deterrence and extended deterrence. Germany hosts US nuclear weapons at Buchel Air Base and participates in NATO's nuclear sharing arrangement. There is no current autonomous German nuclear deterrent, nor any credible prospects of one emerging without triggering a full European security crisis. Secondly, intelligence and surveillance architecture. German intelligence services operate within a framework of deep integration with the US agencies such as the NSA, the CIA, and the DIA. The exposure a decade ago of US surveillance of the German leadership, including of Chancellor Merkel's personal communications, provoked a temporary outrage, but no structural decoupling. the dependency here is too deep for anything other than a symbolic protest to occur. Set next, financial and monetary integration. As we've already discussed, the German banking system, corporate bond markets, and export-oriented industrial model remain tethered to dollar-denominated financial circuits, with 657.8 billion in accumulated German foreign direct investment in the US and 436 billion euros in Bundesbank reported German investment stock. The German ruling class has far too much capital at stake within the United States to risk any rupture. And then we get the energy and industrial supply chains. Following the Nord Stream sabotage and the forced rupture with Russian hydrocarbons, German industry has now become dependent upon liquefied natural gas imports from the United States. The talk of energy partnership is in reality a transfer of energy sovereignty to US control. And we also here get the point about market access. The US remains one of the largest export markets for German manufactured goods, absorbing 161.63 billion in German exports annually. Tariff walls, investment restrictions, or regulatory discrimination, if they were to be all imposed, would inflict an immediate damage on German industrial profits and, of course, employment. But the other side of this is, of course, American dependency on Germany. Washington, even if Trump was serious, in any remote sense about decoupling from Europe, they can't simply abandon Germany without undermining its own global position. So you have several very important points here as well. Germany constitutes a forward deployment and force projection area. The 30,000 troops that will remain in Germany even after Trump's drawdown constitute the logistical backbone for US operations across Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. Ramstein Air Base serves as the central hub for drone warfare operations. The Landstuhl Regional Medical Center is the largest American military hospital outside of the continental United States. And this has been, of course, used extensively in the war with Iran. Not that they've acknowledged all the casualties yet. These are pieces of military infrastructure that are irreplaceable in the short or even medium term. You also have the importance to the United States of German industrial capacity. The remilitarization strategy that Washington wants to pursue requires German defense industrial output. ThyssenKrupp, Rheinmetall, Krauss-Maffei, Wegmann. The very rearmament that Washington increasingly is demanding is impossible without German manufacturing capacity. Even if US defense contractors seek to dominate the procurement chain, Germany needs a very extensive military industrial production base to enable it to carry out the rearmament that the US is now demanding that it does. And this is all, of course, about an apportioning out of responsibilities in the imperial core, which we'll come to in just a moment when we reach our conclusion here. So also, NATO cohesion and alliance management. A genuine and complete US withdrawal from Germany would signal the total collapse of NATO's integrated military structure. It would accelerate European strategic autonomy, which the US has always feared and doesn't want to see come to pass, whilst it would embolden opponents of imperialism who would interpret such a rupture as a retreat, a terminal retreat of US power. You also have the ongoing US obsession personified in the people like in the Trump administration like Eldridge Colby, which is the containment of China. The overarching strategy now of US imperialism comes down to the attempt to constrain and contain the People's Republic of China. This requires a united front of the advanced economies of the world, the imperialist economies. Whether they're still advanced is another question. A fractured Atlantic alliance would undermine the economic warfare that the US wants to wage upon China. Then we get to the point about financial stability. American banks, asset managers, and corporations hold substantial positions in German assets, with 39.7 billion in new German FDI flowing into the US in 2024 alone. American capital is very deeply embedded in the German economy, A political rupture between the two would trigger financial market disruption that would rebound upon American institutions. The mutual financial hostage situation operates here as a stabilizer. So here we have to ask the question of whose interests are actually being served by all of this. From a Marxist-Leninist perspective, the apparent state-level conflict obscures a very deep unity of class interests between German and American monopoly capitalists. The German ruling class, still centered on export-oriented manufacturing, finance capital, and the defense industrial complex, does not seek any real genuine independence from US imperialism. It seeks a renegotiation of the terms of its subordination, seeks greater influence over US strategic decisions, and protection of German commercial interests in China and what they've got left in Russia, and a larger share of the spoils when it comes to imperialist exploitation of subordinated nations. The Trump administration's pressure serves in part to discipline German capital into accepting a more subordinated role within a restructured Atlanticism, one in which German rearmament occurs under US corporate direction. German technology transfers serve American containment objectives, and German diplomatic initiatives, if they conflict with American initiatives, are suppressed. The working class of neither country benefits from this militarization. The 5,000 troops withdrawn from Germany are not demobilized. They are redeployed, or their positions are absorbed into an expanding defense budget that diverts resources from usage elsewhere in more productive avenues. German working class is compelled to accept higher military spending, longer working hours, and eroded social provisions as the price to pay for continuing imperialist competition, in which they, of course, have no stake. Now, the Trump-Merz confrontation over Iran policy is real, but it's a crisis within the imperialist bloc system, not a crisis of the bloc itself. Both parties are engaged in a certain amount of bargaining over the terms of their partnership, though neither can afford to actually dissolve this partnership. The withdrawal of 5,000 troops proposed by Trump is an attempt at punishment, not strategic realignment. The residual 30,000 personnel, remember, this is down from 250,000 at the peak of the Cold War. It operates as a power projection platform in terms of air, space, cyberspace, and logistics for the US armed forces. The nuclear sharing arrangements, the intelligence integration, the $47.9 billion in US goods exports and $92.4 billion in US goods imports, the $73 billion annual US trade deficit with Germany, the $657.8 billion in accumulated German FDI stock in the US, the 436 billion euros in Bundesbank reported German investment, the interpenetrated banking systems, the dollar-euro monetary dependency and shared class interests of monopoly capital ensure that the German-American axis will endure, however strained, until deeper structural transformations force its dissolution. For all anti-imperialists, the path forward here is absolutely clear, though. Resolute opposition to NATO, resolutely making the case against NATO and against NATO expansion, arguing for an end to the war with Russia, and a withdrawal of US forces from Europe. Because, as we've covered many times before, the US forces were not put into Europe to protect it from any kind of potential Soviet invasion. That was never serious. They were put in there to secure the recreation of capitalism in West Germany, as it was at the time, under the terms dictated by the US imperialist bloc and its incorporation into the US imperialist bloc as an integral part. And you can see from the number of investments that the Germans and the US have in each other's countries, the amount of FDI that passes between the two, and the amount of factories that the Germans actually have in terms of the car industry in the United States. And you see a mutually dependent relationship, which is typical of the relationship the US has with its closest allies. And that neither can afford to walk away from this, regardless of whatever crap that Trump talks. The relationship between the two of them will not be changing anytime soon. All of these different members of the US imperialist bloc are all structurally dependent upon each other and are absolutely required to stand with each other. If the US goes down, it would have an incredibly bad effect on Germany. If Germany goes down, it would also have an incredibly negative impact inside the United States. So, um, when we come to the remilitarization of Germany, the US does want this to happen, as is indicated recently by things like the Palantir Manifesto, but they want it to happen on their terms and under a system that they can completely and utterly control, of course. So, we must oppose German remilitarization, but we also must oppose NATO and membership of it, of any European country or any North Atlantic country. This is the military expression of the US imperialist bloc, and it must be dismantled and destroyed using whatever means we have at our disposal to do so. So, what we've got coming up this week on the program, we have a potential Twitter space with the Decline and Fall show coming up this week. Also on the Decline and Fall, we have a review of the coming fate of Keir Starmer. We have another country profile coming up for you this week. We're going to be doing a country profile on South Africa. So we're going to have 4 country profiles coming up for you in May. We're going to have South Africa this week coming up. Then we're going to have Brazil. We're going to have Pakistan, and we're going to have Ireland. So, going to be doing 1 country profile per week. Recently, on the Patreon side of things, we had an organizational questions Q&A, all very good discussion points submitted by subscribers on Patreon there. But later on this week, we're going to be having the next episode in our monthly series on the Syrian civil war. So on Patreon recently, last month, in fact, did a show on the prehistory of the Syrian civil war, focusing on the economic changes in Syria in the 2000s. So we're going to be looking at the beginning of the war itself this week on our Patreon special. So also keep an eye out this week for emergency live streams at any point, because we are approaching the final hours of the Keir Starmer leadership. He lurches and staggers like a constipated frog towards his final grisly denouement, which comes in the form of the Labour Party getting destroyed in the local elections coming up this week. There is a request in the chat to have more media twats. More media twats on the Decline and Fall show will be forthcoming, but we keep finding very interesting things to do. But yes, we will be returning to the subject of media twats. There are so many to choose from in the United States, but to give you a preview, we have already decided to focus on Mehdi Hassan, a rodent type figure who has managed to be a media twat on both sides of the Atlantic. So keep an eye out for that as well. So just to answer a question from Iman Puedama, isn't this a dangerous game for America? It sounds like the relationship they had with Hitler's Germany before he went rogue. Well, as Sid Hatfield says, he never really went rogue. It's a delicate relationship that is defined by, again, as I hope I've pointed out, mutual dependence, but also mutual suspicion. Like the German ruling class does have ambitions there and needs in the class interest, and it's a clear class interest that they will want to pursue. They have a need to continue to dominate Central and Eastern Europe. They also there are factions within the German ruling class that do want to go in the direction of having more European defence autonomy. This is something that the US ruling class is very much opposed to, and they blocked this in the 90s. But as the problems for the US mount up, there will be increasing demands from within the German and French ruling class to basically take care of their own requirements. Now, there's also the problem that the US has, which is that it needs German remilitarization, largely so that Germany can play the lead role against Russia. But of course, German resources are slightly fewer than the US resources. But we'll come back to Germany and the Russia war in future episodes. What is the relevance of the other European partners in this dance? Different. I mean, you've named France, Poland, Spain there. They all play different roles. French integration with Germany is quite extensive. French integration with the United States is not as extensive as Germany's is. But we should probably do a show specifically on France because that's a very interesting. They play a very interesting role. What we're trying to do and use these episodes for really is to spell out how the US imperialist bloc works bit by bit. What role does each of the parts of it play? So I hope we've done a little bit of that tonight. So that brings us to a close for this week on the live stream. I have to go off and cook dinner now. Apologies for the couple of interruptions there. Those were because I needed to run out and get some more water to keep myself appropriately in good voice, shall we say. So next week on the live, we're going to be doing a pure Q&A show. So next week at 7, it's going to be basically an Ask Me Anything. So be sure to tune in for that one. And we will field all questions. And in fact, I'm going to be responding to criticisms from people who've left comments on videos over the last couple of weeks or so. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in for tonight. It's been another interesting one. I've thought this was an informative episode to do. Always pay attention to the figures that underlie that make the reality, the economic reality. The words of presidents do have import, but not if it's the words of Donald Trump, given his tendency towards massive bloviation. And also, the fact is that even if Trump, to reiterate the point, wanted to divorce the Germans, he could not do so. Right. We will be back to you again very soon. Tomorrow we will have another Decline and Fall episode for you. So until then, thank you for tuning in, and I will be back with you again very soon.